Myles Turner is not an all-star yet or an all-defensive team member yet, guys tend to get to those levels when they play next to 34. If he's around that 15 to 18, like and 2.5 blocks a game, and the Bucks are kind of doing their thing, like suddenly it's, oh, who's checking that all-star box?
The five-time all-star Marques Johnson.
Alongside Marques Johnson.
What's up, everybody? Hey, this is the Here District, captain of this vessel. And I got my first mate, my number one son, Kris Johnson.
What up? Talk to me.
Holla! Let it rain, man. Let it rain.
I guess what? We're going back into TGI Fridays. Yeah. Okay, pass us all the break. Okay, pass.
Go fight.
Welcome everybody to the Here District. Marques Johnson.
You're listening to a Bucks Plus audio production on the Bucks Plus Network.
Your weekly pulse on the Milwaukee Bucks, straight from a Bucks legend. This is Here District with Marques Johnson, alongside his son and 1995 NCAA champion, Kris. Here's MJ.
Welcome to the Here District. I am the captain of this vessel that has been it's been rescued. This vessel, it was a runaway ship. It was the Amistad. It was going somewhere that without a destination. But all of a sudden, things swiftly change around. Listen, my first mate, Kris Johnson. Kris and I are the only father and son to win a national championship at the same school. We got to start this off with that. And then we've got the guy in the house. If you ever want to talk about Milwaukee Buck moves, this is the guy to have, Jim Owczarski. Jim, thank you so much for coming by Here District at this most pivotal time in Bucks history. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me, as always.
My first question for you, did you have the slightest inkling that the stretch provision would be used on a guy the caliber of a Dame Lillard?
On the surface, no. I did not think they would use the stretch provision. I don't think the Bucks have done that since Larry Sanders.
Wow.
And that seemed like a lifetimes ago, right, in terms of the CBA and the money involved and all that stuff. So, no, I admittedly did not think they would use that mechanism. What's interesting, though, is late Sunday night, so free agency gets started, and, teams are allowed to negotiate with their own free agents at the end of the finals, right? So as some of the moves were kind of being made late Sunday, get a tip, and it's like, hey, the Bucks are doing something big. No one quite knew what that was. Like, we knew it wasn't a trade. It was free agent related, but no one kind of could flesh that out. And
you get a tip from what kind of source, Jim? What kind of? I mean, I know you can't, but is it? What?
No, someone familiar.
How much can you tell us about the source?
I mean, it was pretty. Like, it was someone familiar with kind of the early deals of bringing back their own free agents.
Right. Okay.
And so, like, when this all started, not to bore your listeners, when this all started, the Bucks had money and options to use to re-sign Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., Brook Lopez. They had all these options. And as, like, some of those things started to get done, at least the guys coming back, it all of a sudden, like, the math, like, people around the league were like, wait a minute, like, this math, Gary's coming back for what? Kevin's coming back for, like, wait, that doesn't fit this. All of a sudden it's, but it was like a where situation. And again, credit to John Horst and Myles Turner's people to find, I guess, a way to open up a discussion. And that leads to, the wave and stretch. And all of a sudden the Bucks were a cap space team. And it didn't occur to me initially because it was a 2-year hit, Marques and Kris, right? A lot of money. Maybe, your all-star point guard could come back late in the year, and then you kind of rock with it next summer and see what happens. But it was a surprise. Like, because even the little bit of what are they doing? No one, trust me, I don't think anybody was like, that's what's going to happen for sure.
Yeah, it seemed like the Bucks, John Horst and his staff put all their options on the table, try to figure out a way. And this was sort of the last result. Now, let me ask you this, Jim. We talked a little bit about it before we went on air. I just wanted to get the clarification about the disabled player exemption from you and how that works and why the Bucks probably or wouldn't have gotten it for Dame.
Yeah, so it was a great question. A lot of fans wondered this. And really what that requires is an independent doctor from the NBA to come examine the player or the records, etc., and determine he would be out until the next league year. So someone would have to come in and say, Dame is going to be out, unavailable to play at all until July of 2026. Mm-hmm. And for as severe as Achilles injuries are, they're typically a 12-month injury. They're considered a 12-month injury to come back from fully, which would be April of next year. Yeah. So the Bucks could have, and maybe they did, have someone do this already. Like maybe they applied for it and that was already looked and they were told. And basically, what my understanding, guys, was Dame would have had to have a setback somewhere in the rehab process to then have the league come in and say, okay, yeah, no, he's out. And then it wouldn't have been half of his salary. It would have been a portion, I believe, around the non-taxpayer mid-level, which is $14 million. And that would have been added to the cap. It wasn't going to be free money. You know, they would have had to pay a tax on that if they went into it. So I think, Kris, to your point, once they got to this part of the discussion, it was, okay, how do we make moves? How do we make some money, make the team better in this coming season and going forward? And this was, the best option they determined.
Okay, so we got the two principles in this deal. Let's talk about the Dame aspect first of all. I don't know about you, Kris, Jim, but when the news of the deal first went down, I got so many texts. You guys waived Dame Lillard? How could you waive? You waived Dame? Wow, that was cold. Just kind of not understanding fully, the business aspect and the situation that the Bucks were in. Jim, have you heard? I've heard different. I haven't heard different. One thing I've heard is that, I just read something today where Dame was elated, I think it may have been the term used. Dame was elated because this gives him an opportunity to kind of take control of the direction of the remaining part of his career from this point on. And what have you heard from his camp, if anything?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty clear, Marques and Kris, that, look, Damian and the Bucks tried their best, right, to make this work. And for whatever reasons, injury mostly, obviously Dame's been very open about his personal life and a lot of the things he's been dealing with personally, right, since coming to Milwaukee. So, yeah, I think there's always an initial sting, right, of, wait a minute, like, I'll just cut him, I'm cut, I'm waived. But then it is, oh, well, now I can kind of dictate to a degree where I go from here. And so, yeah, I think, that idea, Marques, you lived it a little bit. If you can get all of your money, which he is getting all of his money at $113 million, and so you're not worried about that. It's not the NFL, and so that's not a concern. You can be home and, with your family, which obviously is a big deal for him. And then sort of see what's next. Yeah, I think, look, I think it's not a reflection on Milwaukee. I think Dame, he insisted throughout, guys. Marques, I know you've talked to him, Kris, like he did the job, did as best he could. He's like, I have no problem being here. Like he kind of took exception to like the body language experts and stuff all over these last couple of years, but let's be real. Like he didn't. Milwaukee wasn't like trade me to the Bucks, right? Right. So the idea that he's home and can now pick where he goes, once he's healthy, it's I think it's a win-win for everybody in that way.
Yeah. Well, in the wintertime, we are actually the anti-Miami. We're about as far away from Miami in the wintertime. But in the summertime, it's a different story. We're close. We're close. We're not there yet, but we're close. But wintertime. I was telling Kris, Jim, about a story. I was leaving the practice facility, and Dame was in the big Tesla truck. What is that called, Kris? The big
Cybertruck.
The Cybertruck. He's got the big Cybertruck. I'm waiting across the street to head back to my apartment. As I see you and Eric every time we leave practice, you guys are waiting for the presser afterwards, and I'm crossing the street with a bag full of food, getting ready to go eat and chill. And so Dave pulls up in the Cybertruck, Jim. It's about 10 below outside. I'm freezing, trying to get in. He rolls the window down, man. He has on like maybe a T-shirt, maybe no shirt. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on in that Cybertruck. But he's like, "What's up, OG?" And I'm thinking to myself right at that moment, this dude thinks he's in Miami. First of all, Dame, Lillard, and Kevin Calabro, who I work with for years in Seattle, does the TV for the Blazers, got to know Dame really well the past 10, 12 years, whatever it was. And Kevin told me that I was going to love him, that he was one of the coolest dudes, just in terms of treating everybody with the element of respect and dignity, from the front office presidents to the ushers, and you saw that with Dame all the time. He was just a class guy to be around. But there was a certain part of him, certain part of me, the Dame Dollar, the 6 million follower, And I gotta be honest here. I mean, Dame, for whatever reason, I don't know if the personal relationship stuff that he was going through, being away from his kid, being in a city that wasn't his first option. Let me put it that way. It just seemed like he didn't have the ability to take ownership of a game down the stretch on a consistent basis. We saw it every once in a while. But it wasn't like, continually, it's Dame time. I keep waiting for just, more Dame time. We need more Dame time. And it happened on 2 or 3 occasions, but and still he averages 25 and 7 assists, the most assistant points for a guy his age. He and LeBron, I think, are the only 2. So he put up the numbers, but in terms of it translating, Kris, into actual wins for this team won 48 games. I know he was hurt on and off, but I don't know your opinion on that, just where his game was at this point in his career, what we saw in Milwaukee for 2 years.
Well, it kind of goes back to just my whole point about when we initially got Dame, was how were each of them going to sacrifice to basically acquiesce or empower to the other, right? So late game situations, you talk about MJ, obviously the dynamic between who gets the last shot, this and that. It's like as a ball player, as a top 75 guy even, you're in Giannis' city. He's Mr. Buck. He brought the championship. So it's like late game, it's sort of, okay, let me take over, or do I take over? We saw it in the season when Giannis would, and in some press conferences where he would talk about Dame getting off in the closing time, where he was like demonstrative and outgoing about, yes, I'm endorsing him to be Dame Dollar, in the clutch. But I don't think Dame ever fully embraced that role. And Jim, like when I look at this move, stretching Lillard, like I feel like this, and I want your opinion on this. I feel like that this move is going to like psychologically unshackle Giannis and allow Giannis to be back to the best version of himself. He's not playing next to a top 75 guy that's a ball dominant, needs the rock in his hands. Now he's going to have the rock the majority of the time, and he has a team that's built around him that I think fits in well with that type of system. Your thoughts?
It is interesting, and to Marcus's question and your point, Kris, like they tried to, on paper, it was a great fit, right?
Yeah.
The 6'3" point guard, spacing out to 45 feet. Giannis needs space, but in practice, it was hard. Like, yeah, Dame can space to 48 feet, but that means you're setting screens at the top of the 3-point line. Like, and by the time Giannis gets the ball on a pick and roll, there's a lot of reasons, I think, for why it didn't work. I think there was some bad timing involved. Obviously, there's multiple head coaches. And to Kris, your point, like the dynamic of 2 all-time greats trying to make that work and figuring out each other when no one was healthy. Chris Middleton was in this mix for a year and a half, right? And so, right. And now looking ahead forward, we call in Milwaukee, we call Kris, Drew, and Giannis a big 3. But in the scope of like the NBA, no one considered them like a big 3, like the Heatles, right? Like Drew had not made an all-star game in a decade. Kris had made 3 all-star games, but criminally underrated, right? What that was, in my opinion, guys, was a team built around the best player, right? That you had. And to Kris, to your point, I do think this decision and the way they are now flipping this team's roster again is in that vein. It is in the vein of Indiana, of New York, of Oklahoma City, of some of these Houston. You have Shea over here, but no one else has a Giannis, right? Like, they're all complementary players. Maybe you have 2 All-Stars. Maybe it's a couple of All-NBA guys. But let's be real, guys. Like, Kris wasn't an All-Star until 2018.
Right.
Brook never made an All-Defensive team. Drew took, again, years. So Myles Turner might be an All-Star this year, playing next to big fella, right? So I think you're right. Like, this decision helps them pivot and reboot the team in a different way. And your point, I do think it can open up Giannis a little bit offensively because they're different guys. They're not better, whatever. It's different. Yeah. And I think going forward, clearly that's the plan with what they've done.
Yeah, and again, I want to be really, really, really sensitive to this because it's I don't want it to seem like I'm critical of Dame, but just evaluating kind of the impact he had with the Bucks, and I think a lot of it, as you guys have pointed out, was fit. Just that fit was never. And Kris, we were joking about it, I think earlier a couple of days ago, about how we got excited when we saw Dame and Giannis kind of talking to each other on the court and looking like they were, chemistry wise, having a good time with each other. Look. The body language, Jim. Back to your term, the body language between these two seems to improve. It's getting better. So if it's getting better, that means that it has to come from a place where it was not that impressive to begin with. So it did get better, but it was still a major work in progress. And then, the brutal Achilles injury, which we've just seen time and time again between Jason Tatum and Halliburton and Dame. We gotta get somebody. We're gonna get an expert on this show to talk about that at some point. What's going on with that? Because I think it's more than just wearing 3/4 cut and low cut shoes. It's more going on than that. But the point is that. In terms of the perfect storm of events, the way things, the shakedown of things, it works out for Dame, as we talked about, and then it works out for the Bucks because now we're going to move on and segue into switch reel Myles Turner. And Jim, you just talked about him. He's had some seasons where he's averaged 18 a game. He's had some seasons where he's averaged 12 a game. But, and I say this in all honesty, Jim Paschke asked me, 7-8 years ago, what do the Bucks need to be a championship team? I said, without missing a beat, I said Drew Holiday. And this is when Drew was dropping 23 a game down in New Orleans. He was just manhandling our guards when we played them the couple of times a year we played him. And I was just thinking to myself, boy, if we could get a guy like that, as physical, a defensive player who can still get buckets, we're good. I was talking to, I'm not sure if it was Lisa Byington or somebody about kind of what we could use this year, and just kind of, just thinking out loud, I was like, boy, if we could get Myles Turner, just in terms of being similar to Brook, the 3 and rim protecting, but 10 years, but a decade younger, and so here's the question I want to ask you, Jim. It's funny how Myles Turner was considered to be, a defensive player of the year candidate, one of the leaders in block shots and all this great shooter, great this and that. And now it just seems like the verbiage about Myles Turner, they're really downplaying. They're like, well, he's not the second coming of, I'm hearing all this negativity about Myles Turner, man, but I'm stoked. I think this guy, as you just mentioned, playing alongside Giannis, I think he doesn't have Halliburton to get him the ball. Who's going to get him the ball? Who cares? Who cares who gets him the ball? He's going to get the ball on that short roll around the 15-foot mark, pick and rolls with Giannis, whatever they decide to do. But it just amazes me, guys, just the negativity that I'm hearing tossed Myles Turner's direction, like they're trying to downplay the importance of this pickup by the Bucks, and I just don't see that.
Yeah, so we just talked a little bit about the lack of fit with Dame, right? Yeah. Like, it was on paper, it seemed like it would work. But there was a projection there, right? And it didn't work out. I don't think there's no projection with Myles Turner. Like, we watched it with Brook Lopez, who signed in Milwaukee as a 30-year-old center who, quite frankly, didn't have, you guys will remember, didn't really have the defensive pedigree to that point that Myles has, right? And definitely had just started to become a stretch big at that point. So there's no projection with Myles in terms of how he fits. He's 30 or about to 29, whatever, about to be. And 39% shooter from three, has gotten better each year. Is that rim protector where Giannis doesn't have to play the five and he could get, still be that roaming guy. But look, Brook, we all love Brook, but at 37, he was no longer able to stay on the floor against Myles Turner, against Karl Anthony Towns, against Kristaps Porzingis, guys who are still, in the East, right? So, the pivot had to happen. And Myles has led the league in blocks twice. And I believe I saw a stat, guys, where he was just second to Brook in terms of like rejecting dunk attempts at the rim. There's no projection of fit. Like we literally saw it. Now it's just a younger, and you could argue not just younger, but now improving or a better version maybe of what Brook could be. And to your point, Marcus, of like, get him the ball and all that stuff. Look, I don't know if it matters. Again, like Brook there were days Brook scored 25, 26, right?
Yeah.
Myles is going to have those days. Sure. He'll hit 5 threes. There'll be a day where, Giannis is going to miss 10, 12, 15 games. Maybe in those games, Myles is your option, right? So, yeah, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I have some theories as to maybe why the Bucks get knocked for certain things, but I in terms of a fit specifically, I don't think there's any projection. Great fit.
Yeah, I think Turner's an excellent fit. A younger Brook does a lot of the same things, but also has some high-level pedigree, just coming off a deep playoff run, finals appearance. I mean, that changes you as a player. A couple of percentages I wanted to also mention. Unguarded threes last season, Myles Turner, 41% on unguarded threes from a catch and shoot. On guarded threes, 36.5% from a catch and shoot. So, pick your poison. You go leave him open and, man, I don't know. So I think he's a great addition to the lineup.
Yeah, and while we're throwing out numbers, let me add a couple more to the mix. I'm doing my due diligence also. It's a Johnson thing. We look up numbers, Jim. But on the short roll, so I'm looking up short rolls. Myles was number 5 in the league in terms of the volume of short rolls, 245, 90th percentile. But his points per chance on short rolls, 1.2. His effective field goal percentage, 61%. Brook in comparison. So Myles, points per chance, short rolls, 1.2. Brook was 0.789. I was surprised that he wasn't better in that area with the little push shots that he does and all that. But that's like the 21st percentile. And then the other number that jumped out was the effective field goal percentage. Myles at 61. Brook was 42%. Short roll field goal percentage, 42, and that's the 20. Yeah, so you just looking at that in terms of shot making, and I always think of Brook as being a really, really solid shot maker from that area, and he is. But Myles Turner seems to be on a whole nother level, at least for the Pacers last year.
My final point about the effect of Myles Turner on the Bucks offensively, right? If you watched Indiana this year and their offense, they do a lot of like spacing, ghost screening, just movement plays that take defense out the way to create space for offensive players. I think that is going to be an underrated value that Myles Turner, aside from shooting percentages and everything we're talking about, his ability to play and move and his understanding, it's going to open up a lot of things for everybody on the Bucks offense.
And lastly, Jim, before you respond, in terms of embracing his role as a screener, Myles was set the 4th highest number of screens behind Rudy, Vucevic, and Jared Allen, and so he knows what he's supposed. You watch tape of him. He's setting picks on 2 and 3 and four times on one possession. He's flipping it. He's turning the other way. He's going to get somebody else. And so I just like that mindset that he brings to the Bucks at this point.
Yeah, and look, I know AJ nothing but a number in a lot of ways, guys, but like it matters in basketball. I know it matters in basketball. Like it's and like Brook was great.
Yes.
Screening for Dame and then like kicking out and flaring out and Kris, Myles Turner's gonna have so many catch and shoot wide open threes just like Brook did, but Brook wasn't really the roller anymore. Like he wasn't like that just wasn't part of his game. Like he was asked to do a lot on both ends. I didn't blame him necessarily.
Sure.
But to your point, like there's a difference between 29 and 36, 37, all those minutes, all that pounding. And so, yeah, guys, I do think adding that into Chris's point, the offense, and that's a bigger, broader conversation maybe for later in the year when we hear from Doc and what they're going to try to do offensively.
Sure.
But I think that's also part of this is in a certain lineup now, guys, like Giannis is the old dude. Giannis is the oldest guy potentially in a 5-man lineup. And that's a huge difference just from end of the season just to February, right? So, yeah, all the numbers are right, but to Chris's point, also play style and all of that, I think is a big upgrade.
And so we all know Brook. Brook, Stanford guy. I've known him since he was, 3-4 years old when Kris played against his older brother Alex in high school back in the day. Kris was at Montclair Prep and Alex is at Campbell Hall. And Kris, what'd you give him, like 33 and 15 rebounds, whatever it is. But I digress. But so I've known Brook. So and I have as much respect for him, man. It just, we know Brook. Brook is one of the greatest guys to be around. Very, very bright, very intelligent. And to show you how smart he is, he just signed as a free agent to be the backup to Ivica Zubac with the Clippers. So Brook is smart. Brook understands that at this so even just that move within itself, Jim, tells me that Brook probably knew that to fulfill that role as a 33, 32-minute guy and do chase guys out of do all the work they're asking him to do. Brook, I think, understands better than anybody that it's time to take on that next phase of development in your career, and that's being a backup center as an NBA player.
Right. Yeah, that's underrated part of this equation is he would have come back here and probably started, right? If other things were moved and whatever in a different universe here. But again, we're talking about, those minutes probably can't be there. We saw that at times this past year when he was pushed to 38, 39 minutes. There was like a lingering effect of that, right? Doc talked about it. And so, like he's a backup. And there's nothing wrong with that for sure. Like he'll start whatever games and he'll be effective. But for sure, guys, it's an upgrade. And to Marcus, your point, I guess because Myles Turner is not an all-star yet or an all-defensive team member yet, guys tend to get to those levels when they play next to 34. So that's why I say yet. So I think that's why it's sort of not being understood or heralded, if you will, as a major move. But I think for Milwaukee, it's definitely an upgrade. It is. For as good as Brook was, Myles is better now. And it sets this team up, obviously, for a good matchup between those two going forward.
Well, when you say playing next to 34, what are your reasons for that? Is it tangible because of the attention he attracts, or is it more than that? Is it his persona of who he is, how hard he plays? What are you guys seeing with that?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, first of all, I think there's a bigger spotlight. So let's be real, as Drew always said. Right. The All-Star game is an entertainment product. I'm not an entertaining player, but but he also made a bunch of first team all defensive teams. He was a good defender, guys, but he wasn't really getting that sort of love. Right.
Right. Okay.
Jared Bledsoe, first team all defense. Brook.
Great point.
Great point.
So none of them had those honors until they got to Milwaukee, or in Chris's case, the Bucks began to ascend. Right. And so I do think there's a spotlight with Giannis. It's like, oh, look at what that dude's doing, right?
Okay.
And but then also playing next to him is a real thing. Like you're as a help defender, you guys know maybe it's not what it was when he won DPOY, but when he turns that up, it's still pretty elite. And then now, Kris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the offensive part, like the play style. If we're moving. If the Bucks are moving to this like heliocentric or this sort of point Giannis kind of leaning into that, and it's a little more open, a little more free, it looks more like the pace and space Pacers. Is he going to average 20? Probably not. But if he's around that 15 to 18, like and 2.5 blocks a game, and the Bucks are kind of doing their thing, like suddenly it's who's checking that all-star box? Like Dame, look, guys, Dame top 75. He never started an all-star game until he got to Milwaukee.
Wow.
I mean, and that's just a fan, that's a fan vote thing, but that's to the point of the numbers. and the way that looks. So, I mean, I think playing next to the big fella you get that with being around him, playing with him.
Jim, let me ask you this about Kuz. We expected a lot from Kyle Kuzma last season. Didn't have a great year. Admittedly, wasn't in the type of shape that he wanted to be in. What do you think next year looks like for Kuz positionally and performance-wise?
That's a good question, because I know he acknowledged right when he got to Milwaukee he was having a career worst season shooting, and he just never found the shot, right? And so I think it was unfortunate for him where he comes in for Kris. And while I think Doc and John, after the trade, tried to say, hey, you're not Kris Middleton replacement, part of a collective. I don't know. You guys would know this as players. Like, he's replacing an all-time great for the franchise, right? Like, you were the dude who came in for that guy. And so maybe that's inherent. I don't know, but he just never found a rhythm. I know the Bobby suspension, the Jericho injury, he was maybe miscast in some ways, like as a big. And at the end, guys, like it was hard to watch, like, the all zeros, right, in the playoffs. Yeah. So going forward, look, some of it is BU, which means it's going to be better than it was. Right? His career averages, look, he's not a 39% shooter, guys, from three, but he's better than what he was.
Right.
And so I think it's how do you make him comfortable? To me, I haven't talked to Doc about this. I don't know how Kyle, to me, like the non-Giannis minutes, like if Kyle's rebounding and pushing and like, I think that's a good fit. If he's with Giannis, he's got to get more comfortable with the catch and shoot, and or being more decisive playmaker. Because I do think he got caught in between at times. Like, do I shoot this?
Yeah.
Do I put this on the deck and like go? So I think a training camp, a summer, like I think maybe some of those questions could be answered this summer.
Our guy Clint Parks, we know that Kuz has been in the lab out at the men's gym at UCLA every day working with one of the best skill development guys out there. So he's putting in the work.
And I also think that Kuz has got to come back in the type of condition physically that would allow him to guard some of these defensive matchups that they kind of asked him to do a little bit. Because I think he was a little surprised that some of his assignments, having to guard certain guys. So he got to be in shape to do that. And if he can do that, I think everything else, offense will fall into play. And then defensively, he's bringing such a value. We won't have that microscope on him because we know he's getting blocks. He's making steals. He's in the lane. He's doing Kuz things on the energy perspective defensively. And then on the other end, knocking down shots, getting out in transition. Okay, that's great. That's a plus. But don't make it so we're all expecting like you to be, 17 a game, 18 a game. And then you're not really giving us anything on the defensive end. That's my only thing. It's like, be ready to lock down.
You mentioned Kuz replacing an all-time great, one of my favorites, Kris Middleton. And I can remember coming here 2014, 2015, whenever it was, and assistant coach Tim Gergerich, who I had a great relationship with in Seattle when he worked with the Sonics, and he asked me to talk to Kris because he needs work with his confidence and he just doesn't believe in himself. And I watched him play a couple of times. I told Gerg, he's fine. I mean, I don't not really a whole lot I need. He's just quiet. He's introspective, but you could tell he had a passion. You could tell he had the talent. And then he had a couple of games that year or the next year in Oklahoma City and against the Pacers, like 33 and 36 back-to-back. I'll never forget that. And when I saw that, I knew that we had something special. My question to you guys, Kris Middleton, number 22, rafterized. He'll be up there. Jersey's retired. Brook Lopez, will he be in the rafters? A year, 2 years after he's done. Is that number 11? 7 years, all-time leader in a bunch of different categories, top 3 or 4 in blocks and three-pointers and all those good stats, NBA champion. Is his number going to be retired by the Milwaukee Bucks?
Chris, it looks like you got a thought.
I don't. I've seen this question. I've seen it all over Twitter, and I was just kind of like, I didn't have a feeling, Jim. I'm deferring to you.
Yeah. So I
pass the buck, why don't you? No pun intended.
Yeah, I love this conversation though, Marcus. This is interesting. I mean, you literally live this life, right? As someone who's up there, it's such an interesting conversation because there are a couple names up there who. You'd argue like as like history has gone on, you're like, should their jerseys be up there? I don't know. in terms of what they did for the Bucks, right? Like Bob, obviously, great Hall of Famer and all-time great person. Should his number be retired by the Milwaukee Bucks? Like, that's a legitimate question. So I think
Bob Lanier, we're talking Bob Lanier.
Bob Lanier, yeah. Okay. And like Brian Winter, same thing, right? Like, very, very good player. Very good player. But when we're talking about like Marques Johnson, Bob Dandridge, Kareem, Oscar, like it's a little different. I'll say that. So Brook is on that edge for me. Like, I don't like he's 7 years. It's a good stretch, right? Drew was not here that long. But he's also not he's an all-time great in like a different kind of way. Like the championship changes a lot.
And that's my point, Jim. How much should the ring weigh in getting your jersey retired and being a big part of that team?
Yeah. Right. Did he have a couple of 30? Did he have a 30-point? I guess in Atlanta, somebody dropped some big numbers when we really needed him to come through.
Yeah, he got a ring.
Well, I guess like it's so interesting. It's a fun question. I mean, clearly in Brooklyn they're going to do it as the all-time leading scorer there, which is such a fun trivia note. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally.
And so I guess if you're the Bucks, the easy way to maybe do some of that, like Drew, people talk about Drew too. He won a gold medal while with the Bucks.
Yeah.
But that's a short window. And so do you just maybe celebrate the championship team in some other fashion? Right? Where all those guys get their flowers, or maybe you're not, everyone is sort of respected and appreciated, but you're still sort of keeping a specialness, if you will. Like I covered the Packers for a few guys. There's levels from a Packers Hall of Fame to that number being retired in Lambeau Field, right? Like there's levels there, and they've set those bars and levels. So maybe that's what Peter Fagan. We could put this on his lap. Next time you talk to Peter, you could ask him what.
Well, it's like the Hall of Fame. They'll bring in teams sometimes, like these great ladies teams or some undefeated team or whatever, and that championship team of 2021, I believe. I mean that would be okay. That and then that would include Pat Connaughton, who's also out of here after a great 7-year run, one of the most popular players. Pat averaged, I've forgotten he'd averaged 24 minutes a game in the championship year during the playoffs and some of the things that he could. And I think for the Bucks, a guy like Pat, and it reminds me of what the Bucks did with the late great, and I'm going to get misty-eyed talking about him, but Junior Bridgman, one of my best friends in life, who passed away a few months back. But so Junior played for the Bucks his first 7 or 8 years, 6th man of the year type numbers he was putting up. Got traded with me to the Clippers. Don't let me get started with that. And then went to Sacramento on another trade. But then at the very tail end of his career, at 33 years old, the Bucks bought him back so he could retire as a Milwaukee Buck. I'd like to see Peter Fagan, who's really close with Pat Connaughton, give some consideration when Pat's ready to hang him up, whenever that is. But it'd be nice for Pat to, finish out his career as a Milwaukee Bucks based on all the things that he has done for the community.
Yeah, Pat's kind of a different look. There's no competition with like community involvement. Some guys want press for that stuff. Some guys don't. Everyone does their own thing. But I will say Pat and his refurbishment of the basketball courts in Milwaukee Public Schools, Milwaukee County Park, like other school, like that's a big deal, you know? And so like the community stuff was pretty forward facing. And to your point, Marcus, like I think it's like Bobby in that way, right? Yeah. Where like those are Milwaukee Hall of Famers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like dudes who just can like walk into this town for as long and have had, a great impact on and off the court. So, what's interesting is, to your point about that, like, again, my NFL days, NFL teams do that all the time. Like at the very end of stuff, like it's whether it's ceremonial or maybe there is, I know basketball is different. There's limited roster spots. It's guaranteed money. But to that point, I think, there's probably room for stuff like that for certain people, certain organizations for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these other moves that the horse trader, John the horse trader, he said a horse trader, the horse trader, man, he never ceases to amaze me, just kind of pulling these rabbits out of his behind the way he does, man, and I'm just really, really impressed with that. But Jim, which one of these, and it's hard to rank them, and it's a podcast question more than any heartfelt inquiry on my part. But which one of these moves surprised? Were we surprised? Bobby's back. Anybody coming back that surprises you? Gary Trent, KPJ, any of these moves? These guys coming back for another year caught you by surprise that you thought like, yeah, he's played himself out of the amount of money that the Bucks have available to offer him?
I don't know if there was a surprise because I think the intent was there for John. And generally speaking, guys, right, like in his history, if John is intentional about acquiring or re-signing a player, they very rarely get away. Like it happens, it's business, right?
Yeah.
But I think if there's a surprise, it would be how we started this pod was Gary Trent. Like I think Gary had played his way to a certain kind of deal in free agency, but obviously the market, it shook out the way it did. And he's back on. And look, and I think the way this is set up, if this goes the way the Bucks hope and how I think it might go, like he could re-sign again next summer, and we're talking about a different kind of level of salary, et cetera. But I will say this summer, Marcus, it was probably, Gary coming back on whatever exception it is, and just sort of the dollar value. And it's a raise, but it's not, I think, what a lot of people thought for that production, that two-way production for a 26-year-old who really hadn't been in the playoffs in a lot of years, guys, and really performed. And I know it was a tough way to end, but I mean, that was some stones. Gary Trent. No. And so, like, to me, he showed so much. And I will say Bobby wasn't a surprise, but I think Bobby was important. Like, Giannis is the sun, right? And so, but you need everything around that. And look, Giannis does what he can and tries to play as much as he can, but he does miss double-digit games, guys. Like, that's what it is. And Bobby is such a great fit.
Yeah. Like,
culturally, the attitude, and then on the court, Giannis misses games. There's 18 and 13, right? Like it'll help you mitigate the non-Giannis minutes, the non-Giannis games. I think he's a good fit for Myles as a backup five, if that's the case too. So Gary would be the surprise. I think Bobby was super important because if your front court guy is your core, like your 4-5, your backup 4-5, I think having that solidified is very important.
Getting Ryan Rollins at the number the Bucks got him, and from what he showed me last year, especially in the games he started where he played meaningful minutes, this guy, he has the defensive, the metrics physically, the long arms, the quickness, and he's also he could slide over. So he has that personality as a basketball player. He can be on the rock or be off the rock. So he has no problem with Giannis. I think long term, I mean, this guy could end up, we can be looking in 2 or 3 years and potentially looking at a guy that be in the discussion for all defense. If he's given the minutes, that's how I feel about him. I'm high on the guy. I think that signing, that move is like a major sleeper. Do you think Rollins has the ability to be the Bucks' long-term answer at PG, Jim?
Man, that's a good question, especially because he's not a traditional point guard, right? Like we think of point guard as like this sort of like ultimate distributor and whatever, but the Bucks don't really play like that. Not with Giannis. When Kris was here, right? Like even Drew was never like that kind of point guard. So I mean, yeah, he's 23, 24, not even 24. I mean, he's, what a find there again for John Horst and the scouting staff to find him. And look, man, look, Doc takes a lot of heat, but playing a 23-year-old two-way dude and finding out what Ryan was about, like Doc deserves his flowers for that because that he easily could have said, no, he's two-way. Like, he'll play later, or never. So to see what Ryan was about, and the thing I like about him, and you guys can speak to this too, he's unafraid. Yeah. And AJ Green is unafraid. Yes. And Gary Trent Jr. showed me that, and obviously he had more of a track record, but like those dudes, like there's something to that. And to your point, Chris, about long-term, he's 23. Why not? Like we already know he can fit because we've seen it. There's less of a projection there for Ryan, for AJ Green coming up on an extension, or Gary bringing him back. Hey, like these guys, like we meaning the Bucks. Like if you saw that, and you're like, okay, now you're building off of what you already know, as opposed to yeah, there's still a bet. There's maybe some maybes, but it's not a total. Well, this may kind of work. We don't really know.
No. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 19 games as a starter. Ryan Rollins averaged 10 points a game. He had like a 3 consecutive career high back-to-back-to-back games that was just fun to call, fun to watch. But also shot 45% from the three-point line. And in 19 games as a starter, probably not a high volume, but at least, I would say probably 3 or 4 threes per game. If I'm
showing me something.
Guess it off 45%. I mean, from the three-point line. So, and you couple that with the 6'10" wingspan, the defense,
yes.
And then the beauty of what you just said, just not afraid. I saw that the first day of training camp out at UC Irvine in Orange County. I just, who is this dude? This guy's going at Giannis, going at people. He's, taking tough shots in scrimmages. It's scrimmages, but still, he was just impressive right from day one. And so glad to see that. Now, you talked about Gary Trent Jr. and the deal that he structured. It's funny how free agency works. I mean, you've got the Solomon Hill years where Solomon had a solid season. I think walked away with like $15 million a year or something. And that's my guy, Fairfax High School, LA guy. But Gary Trent, based on 41% from the three after a miserable start. I mean, he was down in the mid to high 20s from the 3-point line the first month or two, and had some injury issues. He later found out that I believe was affected his shooting. But why is that? Why was it? It wasn't him like saying I want to sacrifice some money for the good of the Bucks, but the market. What's going on with the collective bargaining agreement? What's going on out there where a guy like Gary Trent Jr. is not making more money than what he's making based on how he finished the season and what he showed last year?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And Gary said this from the beginning, even last year, signing a better minimum at the time. Where he's like the value, and this is credit to him being the son of an NBA player, right? His dad being in the game, and Gary just sort of having a bigger view or an idea of how this business works. And he's like, stats don't matter, value is different. It's not just 41%, 26 years old, $20 million guy.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's different now. And he's like, you gotta, as a player, now you have to find out how you create or reimagine your value. And so I think Gary did a lot of that. Now, what is not in his control is the market. And unfortunately, Brooklyn Nets had cap space, and then Detroit kind of suddenly had some cap space. That was really about it. And guess what? The Brooklyn Nets are trying to tank. They're not trying to give Gary Trent Jr. $15 million. Like, and the Detroit Pistons, like, he probably was a fit there. But the way that stuff was set up, again, the market just, there wasn't a whole lot of just money, because not to bore people, but there are still a lot of contracts signed prior to the 23 CBA that are still kind of jamming things up for guys. Okay. So I think once a lot of those deals start to fall off the books, be it at the end of this year, going into next year, you'll see more cap space. I think that's why you see a lot of 1+1s, a lot of player options for next summer, because I think a lot more teams are going to have more money. And then when it comes to the Bucks, like, look, they've handed out player options quite a bit in the last few years, and it's worked out. They've retained Brook Lopez, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis to a degree. Chris Middleton was a higher level, but Chris was in that boat, right? Where they've been able to then exceed, and kind of stay competitive with retaining their own guys.
All right. Well, listen, man, it's been one heck of an offseason so far. I mean, just anything else you see on the horizon, if you think there's going to be, I think we've got maybe one or two. I know one roster spot, maybe another one, depending on some situations.
Is that for Bogey, or what the Bucks there? You have a sense on what the Bucks are going to do with Bogey?
Yeah, it's so he's playing summer league as we record this. Milton Newton, assistant GM, met with us draft night and said, we're going to decide. Does he go to Europe for a year, play with Mega Basket? He's on the Serbian national team. Will play with Eurobasket, I'm guessing, this summer as well. Kind of decide there. Look, on one hand, the math of it is, look, they've got Giannis. They've got Myles Turner and Dame, like that money counts. You kind of need some end of low salary guys to kind of make that work. But no, I think they're probably still figuring that out, guys. All indications are that, if he goes to Europe, that opens up a couple spots. They can sign a couple more veteran minimums and round that out. Who that could be, again, it's what are you looking for, right?
Yeah.
Is Ryan your guy? Ryan and Kevin Porter Jr., are those your point guards? Are you looking for another veteran kind of minimum to buttress that a little bit, give you a little more of a presence there? I mean, so that stuff's out there, but typically those deals aren't usually done until, a little later in the summer because you kind of have the ability to figure that out.
Well, I just found out that Bogolyub translates into the kiss of God. The kiss of God. His parents were religious, and so yes, he is the embodiment of the kiss of God. So that's a beautiful, beautiful name. Unusual name. I had to find out kind of where it came from, and Bogolyub, the kiss of God. I mean, that's really cool. That's really cool. Look, Jim, we're gonna let you go, man. Thank you so much for joining us on the Here District, man. A whole lot of stuff happening with the Bucks, and appreciate you breaking it down and giving us some clarity, man. And we'll see what happens we'll see what happens in Summer League and what kind of shakes out after that. But, man, I'm just excited about the job that Bucks management has done and the roster construction, bringing back the guys they brought back, adding Myles Turner. I mean, God, things fell into place, man, better than I imagined. So we thank you for coming by and giving us some clarity on that, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both for the invite again. I always appreciate it.
All right, Jim Owczarski, we appreciate you.
This has been a Bucks Plus audio production.